Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to say welcome, and I really do mean welcome to the Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Just for your edification, we have one of these every second Wednesday of the month, and I am just thrilled to see the room full of people. You are welcome every month. We love to hear from you all. This is an appointed position, not a paid position, so we're here out of the love of our town, so we love it when you guys come out and let us know your thoughts and things. So I truly mean when I say welcome, welcome. We're going to do our best to accommodate everyone this evening. We have a little bit of a larger crowd this evening. The rules of the meeting laws basically mandate that we cannot go past 11 p.m. I do not foresee that happening, but I just wanted to put that out there ahead of time that the meeting does have to be closed by 11 p.m. this evening. So everyone is welcome to speak when you want to speak, but just have that in mind that we want to try to hear everyone speak. So if we can maybe lack redundancy in questions, listen to everyone's questions and answers, because I'm sure many of you have the same questions as your neighbors might have, and I'm sure ourselves and Mr. Bach are going to try to give you good answers for all of them. But I think if we can all be polite and attentive to the questions and answers, that might save us a little bit of time, so everyone does get an opportunity to speak this evening. So with that, I would again like to ask you to play please the flag.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meeting Act has been given by the clerk in the following manner: posted on the bulletin board in the borough clerk's office and emailed to the retrospect and the Courier Post. May we have roll call, please?
Chairwoman Cleaver.
Yes.
Mr. White.
Here.
Mr. Boucher. Here. Mr. Wachowski.
He is excused.
Mr. Vanella.
Here.
Mr. Hopper.
Here.
Mr. Laverty.
Here.
Mayor Kapadas.
Here.
Mr. Ranieri.
Here.
Ms. Dodds.
Here.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Rowan.
Here.
Mr. Bott.
Here.
Mr. Knight.
Here.
And Ms. Close. Here.
Thank you. At this point in time, Mr. Owen, in the absence of Mr. Wachowski, I would like to seat our first alternate, Mrs. Dodd, in his position.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay? Just want to manage the document, please. Uh-oh. Obstacle horse. All right. Motion is in order for the approval of the January 9th meeting minutes as submitted by the secretary. As each member received a copy of the same, are there any questions or comments on those minutes? Is there a motion on the floor to accept the minutes?
Make a motion.
Second.
Mr. Vanel, seconded by Mrs. Gushin. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Old business, I do not believe we have any old business. Joyce, let's okay. New business. New business. The public hearing this evening, as you all know, is to determine whether certain properties within the borough of Runnemede qualify as an area in need of redevelopment pursuant to the criteria set forth in NJSA 40A:12A-5. So what we're going to do at this point in time is I think we're going to turn it over to our borough and planning board engineer, Mr. Steve Bach, and he can give you a brief synopsis of what we have on the board that you see there. And then after that, what we will do is we will open the meeting up to the public, at which time you can come up one at a time and state your name and address and ask any questions that you may have for Mr. Bach, Mr. Rowan, Candace, or the board. Okay? Mr. Bach, I defer to you.
Mr. Bach and Candace, would you please stand up? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board tonight is truthful and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Yes. And again, for the record, Stephen Bach, Principal Bach Associates, 304 Whitehorse Pike, professional engineer, registered architect, and also a professional planner. And that's important for this evening because our report really has to do with professional planning. And if I may, and on out of here.
And we are procedurally going to mark as Exhibit 1, Borough of Runnemede Preliminary Need Investigation and Determination of Need Report dated December 2017, which Mr. Bach and Candace will be testifying on.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Steve.
So what we're here to discuss is our report, our preliminary need investigation, determination need report. I'm going to go through several excerpts of this. We do have the planning area map, and then also we do have the matrix of criteria on all the specific properties. So if you have questions.
Excuse me, Steve, could you pick the microphone up? Just because, sort of hold the microphone, is that easier?
Can you hear me? No?
Make sure it's being recorded.
The one?
It is, it's on.
Thank you.
I'll hold the microphone. Is that a little better? Everybody can hear in the back? Okay. And I'm gonna,
A little too tall.
is that as far as it goes? And then I'll lower it for everybody else, but I have to refer to my report. In accordance with Resolution Number 17107, the Borough Council of Runnemede, Mayor and Council, directed the Joint Land Use Board, the Planning Board, to undertake this investigation, and specifically to conduct a preliminary redevelopment investigation to determine whether the study area, which is depicted on the graphic that's presented above, whether the properties qualify under the statutory criteria as a non-condemnation area of redevelopment, and to hold a public hearing, which is why we're here this evening, to present the findings of this investigation. I just want to call this out. It's very, very important. This is non-condemnation. So a lot of people have heard about redevelopments in other municipalities, a lot of municipalities in Camden County. This is non-condemnation. That means there is no possibility of a taking of anybody's property. The properties remain the under the sole authority of the individual property owners. Nothing here will change your rights to your individual property. I just want to make sure that's abundantly clear. It is contained in our report that parcels that meet the criteria set forth in the redevelopment statute, which is NJSA 40A-12A-5, which is the local redevelopment and housing law, that if these parcels are determined to be in need of redevelopment, it would afford the borough an opportunity to use additional tools to implement a coordinated and proactive land use plan for those areas. That is the next step. That is coming up with a redevelopment plan where we can look at certain areas, specifically along the Black Horse Pike and the commercial corridor, whether there should be an overlay zoning over on the top of the existing zoning to try to incentivize existing property owners to reinvest in their properties, or potential property owners to do some redevelopment and try to revitalize the commercial corridor along the Black Horse Pike. The study area that has been requested is the entirety of blocks 40 to 52, 32 to 39, 21 to 23, 25, and 27 to 29. And that is all banded within the yellow highlighted, the yellow line that bands the whole redevelopment area. Excuse me one second. In order to determine whether properties in a study area meet the conditions required in the statute, they have to meet one of the following criteria. I'll read them generally, but they're contained very specifically in the report. These items are A through H, and also there is an additional criteria which is defined under Section 3 of the local redevelopment and housing law. But in general, the properties would have to meet one of these criteria. The generality of buildings are substandard, unsafe, unsanitary, dilapidated, or obsolete. B, the discontinuance of the use of the buildings previously used for commercial, manufacturing, or industrial, and the abandonment of such buildings. C, land that is owned by the municipality, the county, or a local housing authority. D, areas with buildings or improvements which by reason of dilapidation, obsolescence, overcrowding, or faulty arrangement of design, or lack of ventilation, light, sanitary facilities, excessive land coverages, and obsolete layout. E, a growing lack or total lack of proper utilization of areas caused by the condition of title, diverse ownership. F, areas in excess of 5 or more contiguous acres whereupon buildings or improvements have been destroyed. G, in any municipality where an enterprise zone has been designated, that's not the case here in Runnemede. H, the designation of the delineated area is consistent with smart growth planning principles. And the last criteria, which is section 3 of the local redevelopment housing law, allows inclusion of properties in a redevelopment area necessary for the effective redevelopment of the area. So a lot of properties on the outskirts, you'll see that it's a nice clean line around the redevelopment area. A lot of properties have been included, even though they're not dilapidated, they're not obsolete, perfectly wonderful properties, but for planning purposes and in compliance with the statute, we have included them under the provisions of section 3 of the local redevelopment housing law. We've also reviewed all the individual properties, and we have come up with the criteria. And Candace, why don't you just flip? We're not going to go through every single line item, but if you do have questions on a particular property, we'll be able to refer back to this matrix. But we visited every single property within the study area, photographed it, inventoried it against the criteria, and made our recommendations and determinations as professional planners of whether or not it met the criteria I just read, or the criteria of section 3, which is to be included in there for proper planning purposes.
Is that posted somewhere where we could?
Yes, so I believe it's all part of the same thing. So the notice that everybody received was very specific, like this is the document, and the document is on file with the clerk, and it had to be on file with the clerk a certain number of days prior to the hearing in order to follow the guidelines. So, but I just want to indicate, so when you come up with your questions, if you have a question regarding a certain property, we can then flip back and forth onto this criteria and go through why we determined it to be appropriate to be included in the determination needs study. We also included site photographs of each of the properties and also reviewed the overall area needed redevelopment in terms of consistency with our master plan, the Borough of Runnemede's master plan. That is the document that is created to guide mayor and council and also the planning board in the appropriate uses of all lands within the Borough of Runnemede. The last master plan reexamination was just in 2017. One of the recommendations is to revitalize the Black Forest Pike corridor, which has suffered from
Lack of pocket.
It has suffered. That's the best way I can say it. I'm just going to leave it. It has suffered, and also has been affected dramatically by the DOT's changing of the configuration of the Black Forest Pike and elimination of parking in front of a lot of the commercial properties. So what we're trying to do here is this first process is, does this study area meet the statutory requirement that we can say, yes, this is an area of redevelopment without condemnation, no takings, no one is going to touch anybody's property unless you decide that you want to do something with your property. And that will allow the borough to go to the next step if it's successful here this evening, and the planning board decides affirmatively on my recommendation. The next step would be going towards a redevelopment plan, which would be what uses can be permitted in addition to the already permitted uses in the commercial district, and then also what other guidelines should be in place in case any of these properties are redeveloped. And I just want to note that the zoning generally within the area, and that's the other color areas on the map, is the red there, you'll see, is the commercial zone, the commercial corridor. Then also we have the general office is listed up there, and the yellow, the parcels to the back are typically that's the residential parcels. And you can see in that lower right-hand corner, that's sort of a key map. It's hard to see for everybody, but also I do have an old-fashioned board up here that everybody's welcome to come up and, you know, get closer to, and it's a little bit more legible on a personal basis. So with that, under the provisions that we have listed all the criteria, we personally made an examination. Both myself and I'm going to speak for Candace because she's signed the report with me. Candace Canada, who is also a professional planner and also American Institute of Certified Planner certified, that we have made an affirmative finding that all those properties meet the criteria and should be included in area in need of redevelopment without condemnation. So with that, I know there's going to be a lot of questions, and I'm here to assist. So,
Thank you, Mr. Bach. And again, I just wanted to point out to everyone here, I think we, as Runnemede residents, can all agree that we have seen a bit of deterioration along the Black Horse Pike, and our choice as planning and zoning board people and mayor and council, our choice was to do nothing and basically see the deterioration continue. We obviously saw the deterioration of a lot of the businesses on the north side, the northbound side, when the DOT took the parking. That was a big hit to us. I've been on the planning board for over 20 years, and I've seen a lot of people come and go, and we don't want our town to become a corridor that people just drive through to get to someplace else. We have exit 3, which is amazing. You know, we have so many things. We're so close to, in proximity to so many wonderful things. Philadelphia, Atlantic City, New York. We just for your edification, we had a company, a nationwide company named Tapestry come in about 2 months ago, perhaps 3. They have purchased the La Quinta Inn, which is on 9th Avenue, and they are investing $45 million in that property. That was a big win for everybody in Runnemede. It was a big win for the businesses in Runnemede because there's going to be, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, David, 121 units, and they are not assisted living. They are 121 senior housing units. They are going to be studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, all with their own balconies. They may put a memory care unit in at a later date, but these are all people that want to be in Runnemede, and they're going to be using our businesses. It's going to be a destination, and that's why we're trying to do this, because we want Runnemede to become a destination where people say, that's a great restaurant to go to, I've been there, I want to go there. They do a really nice job, you know, doing your hair or whatever. I mean, we want to become a destination. Right now, the Black Horse Pike in many of the areas is just point A to point B. Nobody stops anywhere. They just keep going. And somebody else reaps the benefits of that. And it's time for Runnemede to reap the benefits of that because, again, we have exit 3. We are a great location for a lot of things. We want to help our businesses. You know, we have great businesses in town that are going to benefit from Tapestry, which is the unit that's going over on La Quinta. We want all of our businesses, and frankly, we want our residents to have an opportunity to be able to talk to an independent developer. The borough is not going to have anything to do with the hand-to-hand between the homeowner and the developer. That is not going to be within our purview whatsoever. You, as the owner of the property, are going to have sole commitment to making your own deal. Okay, so nobody's going to interfere with you. Nobody's going to push you to say, hey, it's going to be your decision alone. But we all know, pardon me, we all know that in within the business of buying properties, if somebody wants your property and they bought the other 4 next to it, hopefully they're going to give you more money than what your property may be assessed at, because they want that parcel.
And I'm going to time out a little bit on dollars and money.
Yeah.
Only part of that is because really we want to try to, everything you said, perfect, thank you, Madam Chair, but I just want to make sure that we're getting into the public questions on the report right now, was part of the record. But everything you said is absolutely true, but I just want to make sure everyone knows that as a land use board, dollars are not part of any consideration
Right.
when you're reaching a conclusion. The planning board can't make that on any decision they do with a land use application, nor can dollars be any part of any determination of need investigation. It has to solely be on whether it's appropriate under the criteria. But the goal and objective, which was outlined in the referral to the planning board, is determine whether it's in need of redevelopment, and then that would allow the tools available to incentivize any redevelopment along study areas. Here, the Black Horse Pike corridor, from the Turnpike all the way down to Isham, which is our entire Black Horse Pike corridor.
Thank you. So with that, I guess the best, easiest way to do this in an orderly fashion is how about we start with this side of the room, and anyone wishing to speak, if you could please come up to the microphone and please state your name and address, and then we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you, Mayor, Board, Mr. Bach. My name is Susan Leonchuk. I'm here with my husband, if he wants to come up, he can. And we live on West 6th Avenue, that's 25 West 6th. I'm feeling as though we aren't privy to some of the knowledge that you have. You're sending some information out to us in bits and pieces tonight, and it's a little confusing. I'm hearing different lingo that we as a community don't know. So we need some clarification on that. And probably how long is this project going to last? That's something we haven't heard either. Thank you.
And please feel free to stay up here
Oh,
and
that's
just go
okay.
back and forth. There is no project. So right now, there is no planned redevelopment. There's no project. This is just a study area. In terms of the process of determination of need, tonight is the public hearing. And then in order to do an overlay zoning, which is part of the zoning ordinance of the town, which allows maybe some additional uses along the Black Horse Pike corridor and the study area, that would probably take 6 months to develop. I know that once that plan is being developed, I'm sure there's going to be public outreach before that overlay or that redevelopment plan is adopted. Again, it's been Mayor and Council's direction and also this planning board that we have public hearings like this before anything is approved, and we're going to do the same thing on the next step, if this is successful tonight, on a redevelopment plan. Redevelopment plans are the nuts and bolts, what uses are going to be appropriate along the redevelopment area to be allowed by right, also what are the setbacks, what are the parking requirements, what are the heights, what are any architectural standards that we might want to introduce,
You offered some words like giving us what our property value is. And I feel like we're not even there yet as a community to know why you're telling us this.
I don't believe I said anything about the property. Oh, see, that's why I wanted to interject that. See, property value is
I
not
think we've
part.
already all thought about that anyway. So
Yeah, but
it's kind of something that everyone's been
Yeah, but
thinking.
property value is not part of this process. This is a land use process that we're specifically looking at existing uses and existing conditions of the property and how they all fit together and whether they meet the criteria specifically outlined in that local redevelopment and housing law statute.
You're step one.
We are right in the beginning of step one. There is no prospective named redevelopers, none at all. There's no conversations on that. I can say that because I'm also the borough engineer and borough planner, so I sit on both the board and also on the governing body level and represent them as their professional there. There is no discussions with anybody. There's no agreements in the background.
Okay, that's good.
This is completely what it is right now, is a study area and the results of our findings. And if I do use any of these wonderful terms that engineers and architects and planners love to use. Call me out on it, because I hear them all day long. So if I use these little acronyms or anything else, please raise your hand and say, what is that? So I can make sure everybody's aware. Thanks, sir.
Hi, Bob Leonchuk, Susan's husband, 25 by 6 Ave. I think it fits in with what my wife was saying, kind of. I'd just like to know, like, in 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, what everyone here, if you, to put it bluntly, if you get what you want, you know, however you say it. I mean, right now, we're looking at an overhead, like an aerial view, and our house is like one little dot on that. Could we, you know, just maybe just say verbally, or I don't know if you have any like renderings or anything on PowerPoint, what you could show us, what you envision, just like 5-10 years from now, what that area's going to look like.
Now, we don't have,
And again, it's included in the report, but I just want to kind of go over, and if I can, just a little bit more of the process. This is step one, as was indicated, of the process. First thing you have to do is determine whether an area is in need of redevelopment. Step two of the process is, if it's supported by the planning board, it's referred back to mayor and council, then they can then authorize the development of a redevelopment plan. That is when you determine what the rule book will be for the area and what could be envisioned there. And it's really going to be a rules of not only, you know, right now we have uses that are permitted along the commercial corridor in the C business district. In the redevelopment area, there might be an expanded amount of uses. Also, like we were talking about, that's where how high things can be, architectural standards, buffer to residential properties and uses. So if there's commercial property that's going to be abutting up against residential, that's the appropriate buffer to residential in terms of making sure there's appropriate separation between commercial and residential areas. All those things are the next step, and we can't contemplate them under this process. This process is strictly step one, and it has to just be the determination of need. If it's successful here, that's a process that's probably going to take 6 months, and we're going to have additional public hearings, as I've been told by the chairperson and by the mayor and council, additional public hearings before that is ever approved and put into ordinance or the law.
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
So maybe to help everyone out here, I guess, and Steve's talking very technical, I want to let you know what myself and members of the council, we all live in this community. We see what's happening on the Blackbird Pike. There's not enough movement on the Blackbird Pike to fix these properties. You know, the idea of the magic hand is just going to change what the Blackbird Pike looks like. It's not happening. You know, in the 10 years that I've been on council, we've had very little movement on the Blackbird Pike. Myself and the members of council, if you saw, one of the things we did is we tried to improve the parking on the pike, but we were limited to doing that only at our own property. We could only do what was really adjacent to us. And we've talked about maybe something else to alleviate parking, but there's no way to know what the future will be. So this process has been 2 years. I've started this with the members of council and the planning board 2 years ago. We started this. And we only got to this point right now because of the way that the law is written. We don't have a plan. We have no vision. I know that sounds awful, and there's members of this board who criticize me for not having a vision right now for what the pike's going to look like. Because we can't get too ahead of ourselves. If we don't do the steps properly, we jeopardize the whole process. So this evening here is just to let you know that you guys are in this study area, and that if this study area meets the criteria, and that we've satisfied the public in the sense that you're satisfied that we're looking at this area, we want to improve this area, the board hopefully will then approve this resolution that's on tonight, and then the next step will be at the council meeting. Where at the council meeting, myself and the members of council then will start the next step, which is what we're talking about, that vision. What do we think should happen on the Blackbird Pike? There's business owners in this audience right now that own property on the Blackbird Pike, obviously all the rest of you are either homeowners or have interest in the properties. You know, your input is going to mean something to us. You know, I own a business on the Blackbird Pike myself. I understand what the challenges are on these blocks here. So
We're trying to improve the business district, which helps the entire community, as the chairwoman said. All what we do on here is to benefit everybody, to improve the tax base, to improve the livability of this community. But the 5-year, which my colleague here said, that's a great question. What's the vision in 5 years? We're not there yet. We're not there yet because we had to do all this homework. We had to spend all this money.
It wasn't that much.
It was a lot of money.
It wasn't that much money.
We had to spend all
It
this
wasn't that
money
much money.
to visit every single property, take a picture of every single property, to identify every property. And those of you know, many of these properties, they're not blighted, but they meet the criteria in one way. So, I didn't mean to jump in a little bit, but I'm sensing what I would even sense if I was sitting in the audience a little bit. We're just at this first step. We approve the study, then we'll move to the next step. And once again, your input is going to be very important. What do we do next? What do we get?
I have a question. Do I need to come up or can I?
Okay, just one second, let me just.
I just want to point out, the mayor's property is not in the study area. It's on the Blackbird Pike, but it's not in the study area. I think that's very important to note. And then also, there will be a lot more discussion on if we go through and do actually the redevelopment plan. We're going to be setting up a framework typically, that's how I always recommend it, of how individual existing property owners can benefit from the plan, and also what the rule book is when someone wants to come in and do something in the redevelopment area. This is not going to be a redevelopment plan that you saw 10, 15 years ago, where there's going to be a plan of what what buildings should and shouldn't be there. That's not the case. This is to allow the toolbox to be available for redevelopment and reinvestment in the corridor to occur. And we have a question.
Okay, so.
And ma'am, you're going to have to come up to the microphone, unfortunately.
Steve,
Yes.
I just want to go row by row. Linda Barrios, you have anything? I just want to go row by row.
Why? Yeah, but other questions come up as people ask them. Yeah, road by road doesn't work.
I'm Tammy Kushrock, I live on 26 East 6th Avenue. My house was built brand new 8 years ago, and they took land from the homeowner next to me, and the builder came in and built my home on that particular lot. I live right across from the VFW, and then there's the playground there, the sports depot. So there was talks also that I heard that they were getting ready to knock down the playground and the VFW in that area and clear out that land right there. And I just want to know how my house is affected by all of this, like my personal property is affected.
Well, let me answer that because not enough people show up to our meetings to hear what actually happens. The VFW playground is owned by the sports depot. The borough, we maintain that playground, but we wanted that playground to be put in our name so that the county would give us money to replace the equipment there. That's the only thing that's happening with that playground. We want to make it a public park forever. Right now, it's leased to the borough through an agreement with Sports Depot. Other than that, there's nothing going on across the street. There's no plans for anything. Like I said, we're only trying to take ownership of it, to protect that playground and to fix it up. As for your property, the new house, once again, we're only looking at the whole area and saying we think that there's opportunities that might arise that we want to allow people to talk to you and talk to us and see if we can do something.
Okay, and then didn't you say something like the particular properties that you guys came out and took pictures and did studies of particular properties?
Yes.
Is my property affected by that, or in the area where it would be interested, or wouldn't be interested,
Yes, but you have the address of the block?
Yeah, I'm looking it up now.
What's your address one more time?
It's 26 East 6th Avenue. And also the question is, you had said that you had people come out and take pictures. I have a very high fence all around my property, so how were they able to take pictures of my entire property?
We don't go around inside. We're not like appraisers that go in and are appraising your property.
Okay.
We're going strictly for land use, and we do it from, we have to do it from the curbside.
All right, that's what
We're not, we were never in anybody's backyards or anything like that. We're strictly going from the aerial type of imagery that we have, and we physically go out there and we look at the properties, and we look at them as they relate to the other properties and general configurations. Yes. But we're not, there's no way that type of.
It's 47, I think 14. 47, 14.
So how this relates to individual properties, existing zoning remains unchanged. You're underlined here in the residential R1 district, you're still in the R1 district. If you come and you need a permit for a fence or a pool or anything else like that, your existing rule book remains unchanged. Even if the governing body goes ahead and this process is successful and they do an overlay zone, the only time that overlay zoning ever goes into a place is if someone wants to be a redeveloper of a piece of property. Your property is completely unchanged, your existing zoning, everything that you're already entitled to, unchanged. The only way the overlay zoning or redevelopment plan, and that's how we always write and recommend it, comes alive is when someone can show that they have control of property and want to be named a redeveloper in an agreement with mayor and council as a redevelopment entity. Other than that, nothing will ever change. So it's a document that only becomes alive if someone shows that they actually have land control by private means. So I just want to make sure that's very important. So nothing's going to change with your property unless you want it to.
So you can see your block is actually 4714, it's the second from the bottom, 2060 6th Avenue. Yes. So that fell under that general category, section 3 LR.
Which is to round out the development area, as most of the residential properties on those outskirts did, all came under the section 3.
Okay.
But again, nothing changes unless you're a party to some sort of private agreement.
So what happens if, like, say, I don't want to do anything, but everybody else on my block wants to do something, and then my house is sitting there by itself?
Well, that's where residential buffers come into place. And also, I hate to say it, a redevelopment, and if I may go further, a redevelopment agreement has a little bit more power than, please, a redevelopment agreement has more power than just a straight zoning ordinance. The redevelopment entity, which is typically almost 99% a mirror image of mayor and council, they serve as the redevelopment entity. A redeveloper has to come in and do a proposal to the redevelopment entity. Just because they say this plan is great, under the redevelopment law, mayor and council can say, no, that's a bad plan. Does it meet the general intent of the redevelopment plan? It may, but it still could be a bad plan. They are not required to just say yes. They have flexibility. So if someone came in and tried to make a donut out of one residential properties or several residential properties, the redevelopment entity has every right to say, no, that's a bad plan and you shouldn't do it that way. And that is also some of that flexibility.
Thank you, Tammy.
Please.
Hi, Marie from Exit 15 for that. I just want to make sure I understand this. So tonight is strictly, if you guys are going to pass this for redevelopment area, there's really nothing past that point until we get to the next step. So if we get to the next step, if it's approved to the planning, we'll then have the same meeting, correct? And then if we don't approve like what they're planning, we have a right to speak up and say, and then I guess we will do it again. So that's kind of the process.
Absolutely.
No offense, I lost the property in Fairview to the redevelopment project. Condemnation, eminent domain.
Yeah, not happening.
Not good. So I was a little scared when I got that. So
Not
I
happening.
did your note, non-condemnation, guaranteed?
Guaranteed.
It's guaranteed. That's how it was referred by governing body in the referral resolution, referred to this board as a non-condemnation. So that means this board can only look at it and approve this as non-condemnation. When it goes back to mayor and council, because it's a non-condemnation referral, it can't be added back in. So it started that way. With this hearing, it stays that way, and it cannot be changed.
And I guess my next question is, I understand it's between the homeowner and the developer.
Correct.
Those we can't come to an agreement, and they can't do anything to take, not you personally, but they can't do anything to take it, right? We come to you guys and say, look, we feel like we're being pressured, but you guys stand up and help us. And
They can't make you do anything. It's your house.
Sorry.
It's your house, it's your property. They cannot make you do anything.
It used to be made, I wanted to have it on record, you guys.
No problem. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Another question?
And, good, sir.
This way.
Come on up, sir.
Ben Calcott Jr., 33 Fifth Avenue. My son is right next to me at 28. We both have a small fortune invested in our homes, and it's a house. I want to make sure I understand what's on that map. What's in that grid is what you would like to redevelop.
No, what is in the yellow line is the redevelopment area.
Okay, so, well, what is the red area?
That is the existing commercial zone.
Okay, so everything within that green line, if a developer comes in, forgive me if I don't,
No, please.
trying to understand. And depending on what they would like to do to improve the town, which by the way, I'm all in favor of, okay? I could be approached, and we could work a deal where if I wanted to, I could sell my house.
You could, yes.
Okay, so it's up for grabs, basically, a deal. Because I've got too many improvements, upgrades, repairs, and maintenance to go on. We don't have enough time. But a few of the most recent are 20 grand in solar I just dropped, 25-year guarantee, 15 grand in UV windows, lifetime guarantee, replace if broken for any reason, 48 hours, 7 grand plus in a new roof, new wood. Didn't have to be done that way. That's the way I do things.
Sure.
50-year guarantee. I've got a complete zoysia lawn I've nurtured since 1977, okay? And I do a lot of the work myself. Water heater, year and a half, did it myself.
I can tell you this.
Okay, so it's not a dilapidated, rundown property. Every place on that street, I'll never get, if I try to sell it on the market, what I've got in it. Well, I knew that when I did. I don't care. It's the way I like to live. I take care of my place. So again, my concern is, depending on what a developer wants to do, how far they want to go. Again, you're not saying that I have to do this.
No, absolutely not. You do not have to sell your property, just like you don't have to sell your property now. You don't have to sell your property for, you sell your property for whatever you want to do, whatever price you want to sell. It's all under your control. And I will tell you this much. There will be no named redeveloper that would, and a redevelopment individual project that will include anybody's property unless there's a legal right that they can say either they have bought your property, have an option to buy your property. You would have to be a signature and allow them to represent that they have some sort of standing in a contract value. If they don't have that, you never provide that to anybody. Your property can never be included in any individual redevelopment specific project. And it's
There's a lot of rumors, a lot of talk about demolishing people's homes.
absolutely not. There are no taking, and we are not
Eminent
providing.
domain. My son keeps showing me some kind of paper and this document, that document, and it leads into possible eminent domain.
This report, absolutely, my professional testimony is non-condemnation. The whole process was started that.
I understand what you said, just
Yeah.
make sure I got it right.
You're absolutely correct.
Because the rest of this is for an attorney to look at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is no provision that anybody can take any properties, government, mayor and council, any outside entity, or any potential developer in the future. No one can take anybody's property. It has to be the choice of the individual
Well,
property.
I'll just finish by saying it sounds one heck of a lot better than what it did 2 days ago.
Oh, good.
And Ben, just so you know, Ben, the clerk can certainly, at your convenience, if you come to the clerk's office, he can furnish you a copy of that in writing if that makes you feel more comfortable.
Oh, sure.
That book that he has in his hand, we can certainly furnish you a copy of that is very clear in writing.
Well, and the resolution that would be on for this evening, if the board decides to act on my recommendation, the resolution can be posted on the website. It says non-condemnation. So it's in the referring resolution over here, and the resolution for this evening is non-condemnation means nobody can take anybody's property.
I've been here since '66. I moved away for a few years. I came back in '77. I don't want to go anywhere.
We're happy to have
Nobody
you.
said
Like you
no.
say.
I like everybody. I'm happy here.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Ben.
Ben.
Is there anyone else in the public portion?
I'd like to say something.
Just please come to the front and be heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Schneider, I'm on 18 West 6th Avenue. And I'm still grinding on a question that two people have asked and has not been answered to my satisfaction. And that is a timeline. I understand you're at point A, and we have to do this step, and then we'll lead to another step, another step, another step. If all your ducks are in a row, and everything goes correctly, and everything is just, the moons are aligned, what is the minimum amount of time from this point to when they start construction?
I will try to answer that better. I'm going to try to sneak up to the microphone maybe. So what this process is providing a framework to allow private redevelopment to occur. So the framework would hopefully be done 6 months from now. And that's with the additional public hearing. So the framework is that redevelopment plan, which provides hopefully a little more flexible of zoning, as long as they have, you know, a right to even make a representation to be a redeveloper, and also provide some flexibility under the law for the governing body to give tax abatements for value-added improvements, which some business owners in the study area say, I'm going to put money into my business, I get to defer some of my taxes in the future, which incentivize it. This is all based on private development interest. So we can't say when a developer is going to come in and wants to make an investment.
Give a minimum timeline.
But because we are not getting into the process of being that developer or getting in the process or being in between individual owners and potential developers, there is no timeline. It's all private means that would accomplish this. I can't give an estimate. All I can say is the framework we can provide will be ready in 6 months. So hopefully that framework will make it more attractive for people to invest privately along that Black Horse Pike Corridor. That's all I can say. So I can't say it's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years. I would hope it would start 6 months in a day, but I can't.
Well, maybe I can, I know what your question is. There is no planning of any development. We don't even know if this is going to work. I've sat on this council, once again, for 10 years, and nothing has happened. We're spending this money, we're trying to incentivize people to come to our community, but it may not happen at all. There may not be any interest to do anything anywhere.
But if there was,
Then, once again, if there was interest, all we can say is after 6 months, we'll have another document that states that we think that these other things might work in the area. We advertise, just like if you put your house up for sale tomorrow, you could sell tomorrow, it may never sell. That's the scenario we're in.
no, but we would have an idea of the minimum.
You have
I
a,
put my house up for sale.
there's no minimum, you know.
Minimum, I would expect all of this all in 6 months. So if you have.
I never heard of any guarantee that if you put your house up for sale, it'll be sold in 6 months.
I'm asking for an estimate, and you guys are talking around the question, and I'm the third person that.
We're telling you the truth. There's none. There's no
I don't
timeline.
know unless there's a
No, you
developer.
can say from
So
6
if a
months in a
developer
day
came
to
in and said, I
10
want to develop this section here, I want to put a new strip store, I want to put this building, then you would have an estimate of how long construction would be. But nobody has expressed an interest yet. This gives private industry the opportunity to come to Runnemede, say, we understand you have a development area, here's what I would like to do. Then that plan would have to be approved. Once that plan's approved, then you would have a timeline when they would finish construction. But there's no developers even
You could still
interested.
do an estimate.
Yeah.
There's no.
Unfortunately, ma'am.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else? Come on up. Anyone? Come on up and just state your name and your address, please.
They're real good at not answering questions.
Hi, Dave Snedeker, 36 East Fifth Ave. I think a lot of people are confused by some of the actual writings that are in the book. So let me read you this and maybe you'll understand it a little better. Whereas the preliminary investigation shall not consider whether the area is a condemnation redevelopment area authorizing the borough to use all powers of redevelopment including the power of eminent domain. That's got a lot of people going,
Yeah.
hey, wait a second, somebody gonna come try and take my house, or what?
We have to include the whole wording as included in the statute, whereas, but the first part of that is, whereas it shall not consider.
No, it's not.
Let me see what you're saying.
This is right out of the book, it's the page behind the map.
That's the resolution.
How come we put the wrong resolution?
No, we did not, sir.
I don't know if something maybe didn't get, a knot was missed or something, but I know a lot of people here probably seen the same page and went, wait a second, what is this? Maybe I missed something. Maybe there's.
All right, it's, the resolution we have does not have it, so this is what we're going to be voting on. There's copies of the agenda right here. Right here. I did not.
Yeah, that's not what was in the book. I came up and looked at the book, looked through everything, trying.
Yeah, this is what's on the agenda tonight. You can have my copies.
I can stipulate that what is being presented here this evening is non-condemnation. So an area in need of redevelopment with no condemnation. So that is what the board is considering this evening. That is how we performed our study. That's my understanding of what we'll be acting on this evening. But absolutely clear, non-condemnation.
One other question. Sure. So there's not going to be any state or federal funds involved in this at all? So there's not going to be like the residents say, what do you say, loans or funds at lower interest rates that fix up their properties or anything like that? This is just straight for private redevelopment.
Private.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Anyone else?
Steve, I still have an old book. Everything says non-condemnation, so I'm not sure where that's coming
I
from.
found this on it's in the division law.
Oh, you cited the law. Sorry about it.
Good, sir.
If I may,
Hang on, guys. The gentleman wants to speak. Your name, sir?
I'm Randall Becky. I own 211, 213 North Blackhorse Pike next to the post office. It's under construction. It is a project that would, I suppose, put me in the category of a small-scale redeveloper. And I would just like to, say in support of the purpose of this meeting that speaking from the point of view of one who's trying to develop a property on North Blackhorse Pike, I think it's a great idea that corridor would be designated an economic redevelopment zone. I would also make a suggestion that the fact that we are talking about this and anticipating that it would take 6 months to make a decision as to whether it is a zone and then take more time to figure out what that means, that introduces significant uncertainty. I have blueprints in the car that I can't give you because now I don't know what the process is going to be. So if you're, at the same time that you develop the idea of designating a development zone, I would suggest that you also designate personnel who can liaise with people in my situation so that I am not paralyzed by the process of, your planning process now collides with my planning process. And we both want the same thing, but I need liaison in order to get on with it.
And may I? So, I'm your liaison, so you can contact me at any time. I'm the planning board engineer and planner, but I'm also the town engineer and planner. If there's any questions in that land use process, feel free to call me, but I just want to reinforce something right now. Your existing zoning and everybody's existing zoning and your rights to make an application before the board or to go get building permits and everything else remains unchanged by this process, step one, determination of need, and it also remain unchanged even if there's a redevelopment plan that's adopted. Your underlying zoning remains unchanged. The only time any of that additional zoning and the incentivized zoning actually becomes active is when your property or a property is part of a redevelopment agreement. And the only way that happens is if you specifically sign off on it. So your process that you're doing right now, exactly the same rules as we stand right now to go through that process. It remains unchanged. If there's any questions, and of course I don't have a card on me, but Joyce has all my contact information.
Well, thank you. You know the people I'm working with. Well,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, so
Randall.
please.
Hey, Lynn. Yeah, sure.
Margaret, we have 3 properties, 6 North Black Horse Pike, 25 and 29 West Columbus Ridge. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole point of this meeting is helping homeowners and business owners, whether it's a commercial property zoned for retail, you're going to approve them to do housing, or approve them to do a restaurant. A home property, you could zone it as commercial. Is this an automatic process that this is all approved?
Absolutely not. Every application that comes before this board stands on its own. What we're trying to reiterate to everyone this evening is that no person's home or person's business is part of any agreement unless you enter into that agreement yourself.
No, I understand that, but what I'm saying is the whole point of this is to make the zoning, we'll change the zoning of the individual properties to make it easier on the home.
Steve, you want to take that?
I'm going to say that, I'm going to say
Am I
this.
misinterpreting?
And if I'm not saying it correctly, I'm sorry. But the way the process is going to work out is your existing zoning. If you're in R1 zoning now, you will stay in an R1 zoning. If you're in a commercial zone, you'll stay in a commercial zoning. Everything remains exactly the way it is unless you're part of a redevelopment agreement with the governing body. And that redevelopment agreement is when you say, yes, I want to be part of a redevelopment agreement. And when you have a valid redevelopment agreement, the property that's considered in that redevelopment agreement gets the benefit of this overlay zoning. All right, so your underlying zoning always stays the same, and even if you get the benefit of the overlay zoning, it never changes your underlying zoning. So your R1, where your side yard setbacks are right now, your fence setbacks, your pool coverage, all that stuff remains exactly the way it
But
is
we
right
just
now.
have the capability of turning it into a restaurant or a
Correct.
apartment or
Correct.
retail.
If there is a redevelopment agreement, yes.
Mario Polizio. I have three properties here, but is there any plan trying to get the parking back? The town shall deteriorate if they took the parking away.
Right.
There's,
In certain areas.
I mean, there's no restaurants going to come in, there's no parking.
you know, Mario, you and I, we talked about this, there's nothing we can do with
We
the DOT.
even had meetings for a year, and nothing came of it.
We have no ability to change the state of New Jersey, to change how they laid it out. You now, all of you know, if you've driven now from Mount Ephraim all the way into Gloucester Township, it's now a single lane the whole way. We have no way to change what they've done. All we can do is what we're trying to do with public parking that this board has really been pushing, myself and council, to do more public parking, or help out with this kind of planning, and maybe helps property owners relieve some of their own problems.
So we need to buy some deteriorated property and put parking zones.
I thought about it, but we'll see. Right now, the borough doesn't have the money necessarily to do this. That's why we're asking for, like I said, property owners, businesses to do it. The borough does not intend to be a developer. There's no
You said you
intention.
could park in the corner.
You could park
But I can't pay taxes, there's no place to park, I park in the street.
there. Well, you see, it was court order.
Oh, whatever it is.
But you're right, even 25 parking spaces gets filled up.
Okay.
Yeah, we've also
Just
had,
once a month.
we've also had some businesses that come in front of us that are entertaining shared parking. In other words, there are some businesses that are, say, open from 9 to 5, and then and I'll speak freely, they're the Hair Hut. They're basically a daytime business, they have a lot of parking. Well, a young lady just bought an adjacent property to have a dance studio, and primarily her business is an evening business. So she's entered in upon agreement with the owners of the hair hut to do a shared service to use their parking. And we're really encouraging that because we have a lot of overlaps like that people have daytime businesses and then adjacent evening businesses that they can really take advantage of that if they are cooperative businesses. So we've seen that a number of times, and I would encourage anyone that's looking to do something like that to certainly contact your neighbors and see if you can enter into an agreement of that nature. You're welcome, Gary. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Asa Sertivant from 20 West
I'm
5th.
sorry, your first name again? I'm sorry.
Asa, A-S-A.
Thank you.
A couple of questions here. With the matrix of the properties, I know it's available in the overall document. Is that published online, or is there any plan to do that, or is that strictly to come?
And actually, what we can do, if the document is approved this evening, and I'm going to say also to make sure that the correct referring resolution is in the document, once it is signed and sealed by our office, we have no objection to it being published by the clerk on the borough website, because it then is a public document.
Great, thank you so much. This is maybe just a brief question. Too many kids count looking to move somewhere else in Runnemede, and if anyone's experienced this, how does an overlaid zoning typically affect sale of a home? Let's say if you're going to sell it to another private residential buyer. Does that have any effect on that? Is there anything I should know that when I'm going to sell my house and it has overlaid zoning?
Because it's non-condemnation, your rights as a property owner are undiminished, which is different than a condemnation process, which other people have seen and in other municipalities. This does not diminish your rights at all on control of your property.
Okay, great. Does the redeveloper have to speak to the redevelopment entity before offering anything or even speaking to the homeowner? Should we get that process?
The redevelopment, an applicant for redevelopment, to be a redeveloper would, before they can even talk to the redevelopment entity or governing body, same thing, they have to show standing. So we can't have a redeveloper coming in and reach an agreement and saying, I want, for perfect example, I want the ball fields. You know, well, that's a bad example.
That's a bad example.
Unlawful.
What's the borough hall? How's that?
Say they I should never say ball, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But say, I'm interested in these 5 properties, I want to be named redeveloper of these 5 properties. First question is, show us what standing you have to even be talking about these 5 properties. Unless they have a valid legal standing, like an option or an agreement to sale or something like that, redevelopment entity or governing body is not going to talk to them. So they have to figure out what they're doing themselves.
But I do want to say, we are going to actively tell people that we are looking for stuff. So it's not that, but what Steve's saying is correct. We're not going to entertain an application in front of the board. But, if Steve, we'll have a liaison, I really like that idea. We'll have somebody who helps out with all this stuff. We're going to try to tell people that this is available to them. We don't know if there's going to be any takers. Once again, it's like fishing. We're just putting a line out, and we're seeing if people are going to be interested in maybe doing something. Once again, we're hoping that just us having these conversations might make people have a little more interest. There's some of the people in this room right now realize that there might be an opportunity for them to maybe expand their business. That's what we want to hear. But as Steve said, we still have to determine that they're a redeveloper. They have to be given that designation. A person could still buy any piece of property in town and then ask for a use variance. We get them all the time when people want to turn a property from business to residential or vice versa. That's still, nothing changes. But we hopefully people will be interested.
So if anyone comes knocking on our door, you feel free to ask that question. Have you spoken to said body?
Absolutely.
Well, sure, but once again, we're hoping they come to you and say, hey, would you be interested in selling your property? And then you say yes or no.
But they're allowed to come in and talk in generalities. If we have a redevelopment plan, they can come saying, I want to put in a food court. I'm just making things up. That might not even be in the plan. Please don't quote me on that. But they're going to come and talk to us and say, is that a permitted use in it? And if it's permitted use, what things are my rules? What buffers are residential, side setbacks, all those things. So they can have those conversations, but they can't get standing as a redeveloper and actually be vested in any approvals unless they show they have agreement from the property owners.
More question, yeah. So obviously, the bad ED word, then the name keeps popping up, but with the law saying if the municipality determines that it's necessary, what would that even look like? And I know this isn't about that, but it's
Say that again.
reading up on non-condemnation redevelopment plans from different law offices, and there's always, many of them say, if municipalities determines at a later time that this is necessary, it's a big if, especially with no vision. No criticism there, that's just where we're at. So something really lucrative comes up, or some really good, highly unforeseen thing comes up where, wow, we really want this property that we could never have seen in this February 13th meeting. Great, so we're in that situation. Even if worst case scenario, we are there, what does that even look like? I mean, does it like you have a year or?
Once you go through this process with non-condemnation, and the reason that we have those sort of referrals, whether, and whether a board acts on a determination of need with condemnation and without condemnation, all that came from case law of previous lawsuits associated with redevelopment. That's why good attorneys, good planners, and engineers, we always say, whether it's condemnation or non-condemnation, very specifically, because that way there's no question. If we go through this process the way it is right now with non-condemnation, there's no way it can be added in without going all the way back to step one and having a hearing like this. So it can't be changed.
For 2 years just to get to this point. So what you're saying, we start all over again.
Exactly, and everybody is required to have a new public, it would negate, yeah, we are non-condemnation, and if that was ever to be considered, which I don't believe it's going to ever be by a governing body, but hypothetical, the question is, the whole process will start over again.
Got it. All right, awesome, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. How are you? Good to see you.
Name is Ken Bertrand, live at 43 Broadway, across from the ball fields, grew off behind me, turnpike behind me. So, a question in reference to a residential property in a commercial zone. I don't know how many other folks here are in the same situation, or whether or not their homes are just all surrounded by other residential properties, not so much close to the Black Forest Pike per se. I'm still trying to develop my question.
Where's Chris Meaner?
What's that?
Where's Chris Meaner?
No. I know you're not going to take, hopefully you're not going to be taking away the ball fields that we've all spent so lot of time there. Put a couple of kids in the little leagues and soccer and everything there. Cleaned all the fields up many times on a Saturday morning in the springtime.
You're putting a building up in
We've all done that. Didn't know whether or not the council has, once it's gotten past this particular process, whether you have any type of ideas that you've thrown around in the back room over a beer after the meeting is over, on whether or not there are certain areas that may be of a higher priority for you to look at for developing or redeveloping or not. As a residential owner in a commercial area, which I am, my concern is that there may be certain areas that will be looked at a little bit more as, maybe we're going to look at these areas where we would like to invest or have people come and look at those areas.
I can answer that question. The answer is no.
No.
Nothing. All we've done is, once again, what we've said. We've looked at the entire area. There's no proposals for anything. So we hope that there will be. And once again, if there are, it'll come very quickly public, just like everything else. Every one of our meetings. So there's nothing at this point. After this meeting, once again, if we get past this, we will do this redevelopment committee, and that's when we're going to start discussing maybe what we're going to try to ask for or try to promote. One of the things I will say, we're very concerned about parking. We're very concerned about buffer zones between commercial properties and residential properties. We're very concerned about walkability, the aesthetics of the properties, that they look nice, that they're going to work. We don't want to end up in the same situation we are right now in 50 years where we've allowed something to be built and now the world changes around us and we've got properties that have no parking and we have properties that don't have enough room.
I lived here for 35 years. And I must say that the corridor in Runnemede is atrocious as far as there is no parking. Some of the streets you can't make left turns now, they're coming out onto the pike, they've changed some of the driving areas. And so there certainly has to be, I believe, something done as far as.
We agree with you. Thanks, Dan, good to see you. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. And, yeah, good.
Hi, my name is Pat Smith, and I live at 876 Orchard Avenue. I'm actually not in this, but my nephew has a house on 4th Avenue. He happens to be in Florida. Well, I have a question, because I think this sounds like a really good idea. Is this the starting point? You can't market businesses if you don't have this part started, correct?
Yes.
What are those tools, the toolbox? Are they just the tax incentives for the person who wants to develop, or they're like the, what did you call that, that you get a break on your taxes for a couple of years?
Right.
What other tools are there?
So
Are there
the-
loans and
Right,
things
so
like
the
that?
tones, the toolboxes generally are, that are controlled by the municipality is the value added. So the tax base that currently exists on commercial property on the Black Forest Pike, if someone comes in and makes significant improvements and follows the guidelines of the redevelopment plan, then the value added, you phase in their taxes. And you can phase in their taxes, from 0 to 5 years or from 0 to 20 years. It all depends on the size of it. So the existing tax base is no detriment to the existing residents of Runnemede, but their improvements, the taxes are phased in. That cannot be accomplished without some of the tools in the redevelopment.
So like, could there be a special loan, not necessarily from the town, I don't mean that, are there government loans for things like this?
There are certain financial programs, again, not, the town's not in it, but if you're in a redevelopment zone, you sometimes that's an extra point in some applications for government funding, if you're in a redevelopment area.
So it's really good to get classified, or whatever you call it, as a redevelopment
It's the
area.
best tool that a municipality like Runnemede has right now to try to incentivize private investment into an area. This is our highest and best tool that we have, and we're trying to utilize it, and hopefully, the individual private entities will see this as a benefit, and they'll make the investments.
Okay, I just wanted to know about that toolbox. But you couldn't do the toolbox unless you were
Correct.
redeveloping.
That's
Yeah,
right.
we have no rights.
Okay.
And those tools are going to be very specifically discussed and delineated as part of the redevelopment plan process. So that's the process after this, where the governing body will say, yeah, we want to use a 0 to 5 tax abatement process, or a 0 to 10, or a 0 to 20, or keep it completely flexible, based on the individual redevelopment. So all those things are going to be discussed in the plan side.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
And while he's coming up, I just want to point out that, just want to clarify my earlier statement, that the redevelopment area is from the Turnpike to Clemens Bridge, but the Black Forest Pike corridor that goes through Runnemede is Turnpike all the way through Evesham. But I just want to make sure that my misspoke is correct.
Lil Bratton, I live on East 8. Mr. Bach has mentioned a few times tax abatements. I'm not so sure about those. I think that, say like Starbucks wants to come in and build on the Pike. You're going to give them a 20-year tax abatement, and, it might not do anything now, but eventually the taxpayers are going to have to pay for the tax abatement for Starbucks. And I feel like the council and maybe the planning board would be sympathetic to a business coming in, especially a big business that would attract a lot of customers, a lot of tax revenue for the town. My concern is that the planning board or the council, going forward, might not have the best interests of the residents in mind, in favor of the businesses instead. And it might result in higher taxes for everybody.
Well, I'd like to answer that. The exact opposite. Myself and members of the council, our goal is always to keep our taxes down. what we see is we have properties on the pike that should be worth a lot more money, and they're not. So we're looking at and the term is value added. We're looking for somebody to add value to our community. That added value will increase the value of our entire community. And when we increase the value of our entire community, each individual's percentage of taxes actually goes down. Because you take the pie and you divide it up amongst all the people here. So we're hoping, I hear what you're saying, and there's a lot of things to be considered about giving away the whole shop, and that will not happen. All we're trying to do is get the values on the pike to be increased, so that even the rest of the values, the surrounding values, like you say, will also increase. We're very mindful of that. I mean, we're not going to just give it away without a lot of thought about what we're doing if we have the opportunity to make a redevelopment application.
Right. Whenever towns start mentioning tax abatements, it worries me. You know, I've seen what happens in
Understand.
Camden. I've seen what happens in Camden.
Yeah.
I've seen the tax abatements, the hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's just rich people getting richer off the backs of the residents. You know, the residents of Camden are now moving into Winslow Township because they can't afford to live there anymore. You know, if housing costs go up in Runnemede, I know Camden's a much different situation than Runnemede, but if housing costs go up in Runnemede, taxes end up going up in Runnemede because a ton of, you know, major national businesses want to move down to the pike to get some quick money from the tax payments being offered. It might drive people out, and that's my major concern.
And I'm going to answer a little bit of the question. I think you're alluding to. Tax abatements is not money ever given to a developer from the borough of Runnemede. It's when they have to pay their taxes. They buy a property on the Black Horse Pike, and the tax is X. Year one, after they make all their improvements, they still have to pay X. It's just phasing in the additional taxes because they're going to be higher assessed for all their improvements. They are never getting a dollar. They are never getting a dollar given to them by the borough of Runnemede. So it's not a tax incentive like I think you're speaking of Camden. It's just slowing down their increased assessment of what they have to pay for the value added. So as part of this process, we would never lose $1 of taxes. We would just slow in the phasing of the additional taxes they have to pay because they are making the properties more valuable. So I'm hoping, thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Good evening.
I'm Ron Moho, 404 North Black Horse Pike. I want to thank you for what you're doing here tonight because my wife and I came here in 1971, and you see the difference between 71 and now at the Black Horse Pike is deplorable. So I thank you.
You're welcome, Ron. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll get you next, ma'am. It's all good.
Suzanne Martinez, 17 West 6th Avenue. I've lived here for 15 years now, and I just put my house on the market a month ago because I don't like the state of the area around me. And people say, well, why do you want to move if you've been in your home for 15 years? And I say, because the area's turned. One of the issues around me is the parking, because of the fact there's no parking on the pike. My neighbors have their trash cans outside in front of their home 7 days a week. And it's like you just get sick of looking at it. I wind up having a landscape, the 5 homes surrounding me. It can't continue to do that. So my home is on the market. My question is, do I have a legal obligation to disclose to a potential buyer that my home is part of the redevelopment study?
I'm going to look to the solicitor.
No, I don't think you do, because it's not diminishing the value of your property. And as Steve said, the zoning doesn't change on your property. So whatever that zoning is now, what you're permitted to do, you can do whether or not there's an overlay or not. So it would not affect your property.
Right, but if the potential owner finds out that the area is under study, it can dissuade somebody from purchasing my property now.
Well, if they understood what a redevelopment plan is, I don't think it would be sweet. But, I mean,
yeah, excuse me, I was going to mention that too, that it might actually persuade them to, because it means that there might be redevelopment and things happening in the area that would raise the value eventually. The property. and added flexibility of zoning.
That's the big thing, is the added flexibility of the zoning. I think it would do the opposite of what you're speaking of. I think it would be appealing to someone that would be a potential buyer.
You also can equate it to something we do every 10 years, whether it's a master plan reexamination, where we look at the zoning of every parcel in the municipality, every property in the municipality, every 10 years, and look at that on whether it should be an R1, R2, commercial. It's just a land use process. But again, we can't speak as to the sale of your individual property, but we can just represent what we believe our
So if I
intentions
want
are.
to sign up to sell, is there someplace I could go, or that would still be part of this whole overall
It's
process?
private. It's not.
It's something that I could
No.
say, I'm ready to make a deal with you
Exactly.
right now.
The governing body, we're not,
I'm here to make a deal.
we're not coordinating this effort. We're just providing, hopefully, an expanded rule book for private investment.
Okay, and then I have one other question. It seems we all really want to confirm that our home is part of this listing, and not everybody had a chance to take off from work to come to the office to find that paperwork. Does anybody have a listing and can leave it in a place where, as everybody walks out of here tonight, we can confirm that our home is
If they
on the
receive
list?
the notice, that means they're part of that listing,
Okay.
right? If they receive the
So
notice,
if we
part
got
of
it
the
in the
listing.
mail, we're part of the site?
Yes.
Period. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Suzanne. Thank you.
But this report will be online, and then the matrices, which have, and again, which is the spreadsheets that you saw, will have individual block and lot and addresses. So you'll see, and these are all the properties in the study area.
Yes, patients with seat. Oh, ma'am.
Wow, this is too tall for me. Hi, I'm Rochelle Omenson, 121 Singley Avenue, and I do have a vision. I'm just going to turn this way. Okay. So I'm an art teacher in Runnemede. I've been working with Ken Leaf, who's sitting right there in his awesome outfit. We've been working just the last few months on an actual vision for Runnemede. For all of you that are saying you've been in your homes for so long and you love what it used to be, and you see
now, too.
exactly, and we love what it is now, and you guys know what it can be. You guys know what it can be, or else you wouldn't have started this study 2 years ago. We have amazing ideas and we have amazing people behind us, and we've started something new called Reimagine Runnemede. And there's even a logo for it now. There it is. Okay, it's 2 R's. Yeah, here. There it is. Okay. And sir, you got this for being so awesome. There you go. So this includes all of this. Yes, parking is a thing, but parking is a thing in Collingswood, parking is a thing in Haddonfield, and my students leave Runnemede and drive to Haddonfield just to wander around and look in stores that they can't really afford, but they land at the coffee shop, right? So that same thing that happened in Collingswood and in Haddonfield and everywhere else, can happen here. And we think it does involve you guys, because you do have visions for your children, your grandchildren, your neighborhood, not putting trash cans on your curb, all of those things. I don't want you to leave. I've only been here 6 years. You seem very pleasant. We would like you here. So you guys are awesome for coming out here. We know not everyone, leaves dinner and then still goes to like a kind of boring room and sits here instead of watching Netflix, right? So you guys do care. So we need you to care more about this. We both have business cards with a thing that we add to every day with a website where you guys can go. We have plans for my students. We're painting murals. We're painting murals on buildings, all the buildings that are around me, including the library, the Harry Williams building, the dry cleaners, giant white gorgeous spaces where murals can go. So that when you do get off exit 3 is nothing now. It's like a Wendy's in bad hotels. You get off exit 3, people want to go Snapchat and Instagram on all the cool buildings in Runnemede. And oh look, now there's a cool restaurant. Now there's a cool anything. We already have a cool bakery, Polish restaurant, an awesome dude who fixes musical instruments. There's also, you guys are here. You're the good ones. So we need people to come here and recognize how awesome it can be, because it's happened everywhere else. So we have this vision. So I'm just saying to you, we do have a vision. So if they do bring this overlay of redevelopment in, we have a way for this to look good without necessarily saying we need 80 million parking lots or more parking spaces.
So I have business cards, Mr. Leap has business cards. You can check out the website, see if you actually want to be part of our plan, because it's kind of cool. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Good night, then. Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
I got people in resolution from the governing body was silent on condemnation. The planning board, in authorizing the planning board planner to undertake it, said we are undertaking this as a non-condemnation. So, referring resolution from governing body that was silent.
Doing storefront design.
The planning board undertook this investigation and this report before this hearing tonight as a non-condemnation. Our report is based on non-condemnation, and any decision that the planning board would make would be non-condemnation. I just want to make sure it's very, very clear. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Charlie, come on up, sir.
Charles Buckheim, 223 Sunbrook Road. I lead a little boring life now that I'm retired. I've been coming to these planning and zoning board meetings every month for the past 3 years. And for those that were concerned about whether they're going to take the property, you've heard it said several times, it's being recorded. It's not going to happen. I've watched these hard-working, honest people for the past 2 years talking about this plan, and I want to see, I've lived in this town since 1964. My children went to the schools here, they're grown adults now. And I want to see this pipe of ours to be something where, when my wife and I say, hey, we need to get the vacuum cleaner bags. We go to Collingswood. What about that restaurant? We go to Haddon Heights or Collingswood. I want Runnemede to be that, because I live here. I want us to have a vibrant Black Forest pipe, and I hope you'll support this idea. And again, your property doesn't get sold unless you want to sell it. But these people put a lot of time, as a resident and a friend of yours. I'm here every month, and what they're telling you is the God's honest truth. They want to do what's good for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. Anyone else? Yes, sir. We'll get you, Mike. We'll get you next, all right?
Charles McBride, 13 East 3rd Ave. Question is, heard some things from the artist over there. Excuse me, I forget her name. So,
Michelle.
parking lots. You guys know where you're going to put parking? On campus? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Who can we contact if you can give me some type of contact information in reference to parking? I've sent numerous emails and stuff.
Hold on. I know it's a little trouble, but.
I'm sorry. So
Can you just say your name, please?
I'm sorry, Tammy Petraka, 2066 Avenue. I've sent numerous emails to the VFW. I've sent it to the Runnemede Township. I've sent it through the Facebook Messenger page, which now nobody responds to that anymore. Regarding parking, when they hold events at the VFW, they redid the parking lot, but now when they're holding events there, people are parking on the streets, and we can't even get into our driveways because there's so many cars that are on the streets now, and they're butting up to our driveways that it's hard for us to even get in our driveways. And this has been, I've been sending emails and making phone calls for 2 years. Not one person from the township or the VFW has returned any single one of my phone calls.
Have you contacted the police when this happens?
No.
That's an enforcement concern that that's out of our purview. That is definitely an.
I mean, what do you say? There's people parking on the street? No, they're butting right up to the end of my driveway. So when I'm trying to turn into my driveway, I can hardly turn into the driveway, or you're trying to back out of the driveway. The cars are like right there, where there's somebody parked in front of my driveway and on the corner of both of my driveways that I can't even get out.
And I don't have no place to park. And neither does her sit next to me.
Thank you, Danny.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what I heard here. This is the land use board, so they really consider that. But a representative, the mayor, indicated that most likely would be a police issue. Please contact the police. And any other questions, you can always contact our borough clerk. And the borough clerk, thank you. And the borough clerk will direct the questions to your most appropriate personnel. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you.
Hello, Michael, how are you?
Hi, I'm Mike Bosky from Books Lars, 815 North Black Horse Pike. I think this is exciting for the businesses, but I think it's scary for the residents. I would say, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. I really don't have a lot of questions about this. I guess the next step when it comes to the planning, I'm sure the big concern is there an overall vision of how business and residential interact with each other to create a true community? You know, I think there's opportunities for pathways. We have that beautiful pathway that almost is forgotten on where the railroad tracks were. I mean, are there overall thoughts like to try to like pull all of that together that could really be a pretty dynamic space?
Natural buffer, pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a natural buffer, and I think they could be tied in. I think it would be very exciting if everybody comes to it with an open mind, the next step. I think it'll be inspirational for my business. I mean, Ken and I have been talking. I'm all behind the reimagined Runnemede. I'm sure that you are too. It's about how we all work together to make this.
Well, let me make it clear, Mike. We weren't really allowed to do the next step.
Okay.
So even though I appreciate, obviously, it's great that there's enthusiasm. That's what's going to make this community. Enthusiasm by its residents and by people who care. But my position as an elected official and representing the town, we really couldn't get to that step. I mean, that would be improper. So the step was to do this study. I've been criticized for it, but it was the right thing to do. We had to do the study first. We can't put the cart in front of the horse. We must do the proper mechanism first. As long as the people in this audience and members up on this dais agree to make this next process, the next step happen, then I would love all the input from everyone to help us do this. And I agree with you, all this stuff is good stuff. And once again, we really can envision things, but we're really only doing diagrams. We are not the developers. We are not going to do that stuff. You may decide what you want to do on your properties and around you and things like that. We're going to be supportive of all that and have diagrams to really, hopefully kind of corral it a little bit. And we will try to influence people in the sense that we want certain people to come here and do different things like that. But we're limited in that sense. But I will say this, and hopefully everyone in this audience has seen the Borough of Runnemede, myself and the members of council since, once again, these past 10 years. We've invested in our own properties first. We've tried to make the buildings better. We see what we need to do on our own properties to improve them. We've been investing in infrastructure. I don't know if anybody paid attention. We've been paving a lot of roads. We've been fixing a lot of sewer systems. We're putting sidewalks in right now in the middle of the winter. We have some sidewalks going in. Trying to protect the kids going to schools and going to school and things like that. We've worked with our local school. If anyone saw how wonderful Triton looks right now. Really, the investment that our local government has been putting into this town has been a big change. But once again, there's only so much money. We don't want to, we want to be very conscious of property taxes. I'm going to tell you that. I'm very conscious of property taxes. We're going to do everything we can not to raise property taxes. And so we have to be very careful where we spend our money.
Yeah, it'd just be nice to have that.
I'm with you.
Where residents stay in Runnemede.
Absolutely. We want people to stay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks to you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Good night.
They will vote yes. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.
Don't worry, Nick, this is Bobby Vidge. Gene Smith, 876 Orchard. Question, how did you pick this zone? You went a block back on either side?
Can I have your name cut, please?
Sure. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir. How it was established was starting with the Blackbird Pike corridor in the commercial zone, and then coming up with other development areas that I personally have reviewed or been part of as part of what I do for a living as a planning board engineer or an applicant's engineer in other municipalities in terms of the depth that provides the most amount of flexibility for something to occur.
Parking.
Just
If you don't go a block back, you don't have the parking. So in other words, my question is
Well,
this.
a perfect module to take a look at is right there, and Candace, can you use a little mouse real quick? CVS, see that block right there, all the way from beginning to end, right? There we go.
Yeah.
A little one over, right there, that's CVS right there. If you look at that, that's a perfect module of what is an appropriate depth for something to be a functioning commercial development in today's standards and parameters. So that is sort of like that, that's the module that we use, and that's how we establish the depth on both sides.
Okay, my next question going forward is the apartment complexes that are on the pike. This is a bad idea from the beginning. And these guys in the fire department will tell you that some of these places are fire traps. These guys can't get in and out of them, you know, with the emergency equipment and stuff like that. So going forward, you're not going to rezone for this kind of thing. Somebody can't replace an apartment complex with an apartment complex.
Very well could, I don't know.
You'd let that happen?
Again.
You'd let that happen?
Well, I think your question is that the current construction of those apartment buildings are hazardous. So if a new applicant came in, any applicant came in, we're going to make them follow the rules. One of the reasons Freddie's on this board is so that he is able to help with these kind of decisions. So if he didn't sign off on it, we wouldn't do anything that would jeopardize people's safety, public safety.
But the use of actually having residential in the redevelopment zone very well could be, and that's, I hate to say, I'm going to telegraph, one of the best planning models is having commercial up on the face of a commercial corridor like Blackbird Pike, and having residential above.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
that
know
very
what
well
they-
could happen.
What they did in Woodbury and
Yeah,
places like that.
that very well could be part of what is decided on after we go through that next process. I will say that anything that is going to be redeveloped will not only have to go before the planning board, but I also understand that the planning board is always going to allow input from our public safety officials in terms of everything, in terms of circulation and fire and everything else, so.
Okay,
I would do permit, they still would have to come before the construction board.
Correct.
So they would have height and area limitations, fire lanes will have to be put in, so they're not getting a free ride that way.
No.
There's no free ride, but they would still be.
You still have to go through the same process.
Same
So
process.
you're good with it, Fred, I'm good with it. Okay, reading your master plan a few years ago, you talked about if you did something like this, you would have a theme, like you would like to see a theme for the town? Is that going to?
Well, that theme is having a consistent set of, and I believe the master plan portion you're speaking of is the pedestrian enhancements and also the streetscape enhancements. So and we have a lot of properties along this section of the Blackbird Pike, so we're hoping that if someone's going to be doing improvements along the sidewalk area, that everybody does the same sort of improvements. So I don't have, and I know this is crazy, but I don't have a doo-wop theme coming in with an old-fashioned, 1940s borough theme. I want to make sure everybody's using the same sort of theme. So when you're going down the Blackbird Pike, it all complements each other.
So it's not going to be, I don't get this, it's not going to be like eclectic as hell as it is right now. I mean, there's.
What you're trying to do, again, everybody still has rights to their property, but the good thing is on a redevelopment plan, and if they are redevelopment projects, architecture can be considered in the approval process by governing body. Right now, as a regular land use board, when someone comes in, we're looking at height, setbacks, coverage, and things like that. We have no ability, unless they're asking for a variance, we have no ability to take into what the architecture is. It's their building, they can do it, they can make it look as what they want it to look like as long as it passes code. In a redevelopment, when you're a designated redeveloper, after all those process, architecture can be looked at by the redevelopment to try to look at the aesthetics.
Another question, and I don't take up, I know you guys got.
Take your time.
Reading your master plan, why didn't you include Irish Hill in this? Because that's the crown jewel of this town. I mean, you talked about that in your master plan, the redevelopment, maybe a restaurant on the top of Irish Hill.
And it very well.
And I mean, if you encompass that in there, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to fix up a blighted zone, and I would caution you on saying high tides lift all boats and you'll lower taxes, because my taxes have never been lower here. But that being said, I don't know why you didn't pick,
This does not prohibit actually going down Clements Ridge Road in future study areas.
so you could expand this zone.
It would be its own zone and it would start on its own process. So right now, because this is cohesive and there's sort of a shared characteristics of being along the Black Horse Pike corridor, it made sense to study this area as it is now.
Okay.
And then going towards, in the future, if governing body ever decides, they can refer some areas on the Clements Ridge Road corridor, which also would have some shared characteristics.
Okay.
So that's.
So you could expand out into the town, because you
Sure.
also mentioned in your master plan that, and I don't get this here, you subdivide lots and you build a new house, and you talked about this house having, or this town having older housing stock that was really in bad shape. We allow in this town somebody to build a new house next to a piece of crap.
I talked about the age of it, and then also under the master plan, you have to come up and say what the values are and anything else. I didn't say in that master plan that any houses were in bad shape. I only provided demographics, and that's what we have to do.
Right.
But we do have an aging housing stock, which is absolutely valid, because a lot of our homes have been, it's not a brand new community. We're not down in Beckett, down in Gloucester County, where the majority of the houses are new. Most of our houses have been around for a while, so.
Okay, well, you're being kind, but I appreciate it.
Hey,
Thank you very
Gene,
much.
just one last thing, your idea is a good point about different redevelopment zones. But we'd have to look at each one individually and start the whole process over again. So I hear what you're saying, if we looked at Irish Hill, we would, once again, look at that area, do a study, do the whole process over again. I agree with you, but once again, we were looking, as you said, on Black Horse Pike only.
Okay.
And that's what we came.
I'd like to thank you, and I applaud this. I think this is a great idea. It just took too long to get.
Yes,
I
took
mean,
way
I've been
too long.
here for 60 years. And
Gene, I'm with you.
I saw this town in its heyday, and Freddie.
We're behind the curve. We're late. We're late to the game.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, we're very late.
Be smart about it. Do it the right way. Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak this evening? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Shirley Patel, okay, I'm at 19 East 9th Avenue. I have two questions for you. Question number one is, let's say I decide to go for this plan, okay? And we go further, we kept on going. Last minute, I decided I want to back off. Can I back off at any time I want?
Back off, why?
Like, let's say I agree for this redevelopment, okay? And then we move forward, we go to a step number 2, step number 3, whatever. And then I decided that I don't want to do this no more. Can I back off?
You have absolute control of you're talking about your individual property?
Yes.
All control of your property is your control, nothing to do.
At any time?
Now and forever.
You're not saying, if this resolution goes through forward this evening, it doesn't change your property rights at all. If step 2, the redevelopment plan is perfected in the next 6 months and adopted, it doesn't change your rights to your property at all. Nothing we're doing here is going to change the right to do with your property as you wish, for anyone.
Okay, question number 2, which I kind of did not agree with you guys, was that, like, let's say you guys were saying that if I move forward with this plan, you guys were saying that the owner, like any business owner can come up to me and tell me if I wanted, and ask me whether I wanted to sell a property, right?
A redeveloper.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, with all this fraud going around the world, like, how do I know if it's legit? Or how do I know if it's, you know what I mean? Like, I would rather have a township come up to me and say, hey, blah, 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 is interested in your property, would you be interested?
Well, that's you can contact Mr. Bach, because Mr. Bach, again, will be the liaison.
Well, we're not getting in the middle of any private real estate
You'll
deal.
be able to tell her if that particular
Yeah,
person.
but again, it's the same thing as someone coming in and wants to, today, even without this, wants to buy your property. It's your rights as an individual property owner, and it's also your responsibility as an individual property owner to make your own decisions on your real estate. The governing body, nor my office, nor anyone affiliated with the Borough of Runnemede is going to get in the middle of a private offer transaction or anything else.
We can't
That's
legitimize it.
outside of our purview.
We can't legitimize it anyway.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Comment what she was saying. We
Ma'am,
have a lot
I'm
of
sorry.
elderly
Go on,
residents, and
Susan,
she might have a point. We have a lot of elderly residents, or maybe unsuspecting residents, and how are you going to maybe protect them in the future? Give us knowledge, or give these elderly people who own a home knowledge, so that they don't accidentally take their property away, sign off their property.
They're gonna be selling their own property,
I
man.
know that, but we have to remember that we have a lot of people who don't know what's going on, who are unsuspecting, and really could get ripped off if we're not helping them in the community. So like what she said, like the township coming out and saying, this is a possibility that might happen in your area. It would be great for us to see, like, these are some steps that you should take before signing off on giving away your property. If that makes sense.
You won't be giving away your property.
No, I understand you're not giving it away, but selling it, signing it off to someone to redevelop the area. We need to protect the people.
It's the same as any other transaction between two parties, man.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm level-headed, I can read and write, I understand lingo. If I can't, I know how to get to it. But we're talking about people who maybe don't. There's seniors on our block who are unsuspecting, and that could
We can't get
be
in
a
the
negative
middle,
effect.
we can't get in the middle of any of that.
But if we're going through this redevelopment process, maybe you could just align some steps for us to take to pass out to your homeowners and say, just be aware, these are some things that you should do before signing any documents.
That would take on responsibility and liability here. The only thing we can do is take your concern. We have a great senior group in town, you know.
Yeah, we can try to communicate, I get what you're saying.
On the existing avenues that we can, you know, as a community, we can reinforce the resources that we have, like we do with a lot of the mailings and things like that. But in terms of this body, as part of this process, getting in between real estate deals is not, but I hear what you're saying, it's just not, it's not the place for,
Okay, so it's not this group, it's some group in town.
we have a very active.
Well, I'm thinking, you're right, I wasn't thinking about people knocking on people's doors. But once again, if someone came to your house and said, I'm gonna give you $500,000 for your property,
Sold.
I assume you wouldn't sign the deed until you got the $500,000.
I wouldn't either, but, you know,
Okay,
people get
so,
scammed.
I mean, we have solicitation laws, this is a little different than that. We do have, you know that, you have, you know.
It might not be. I mean, if they're just wholesale, just going out and trying to solicit as a middle person, then they might be in violation.
I mean, there are realtors sometimes
Yeah.
that bundle properties together.
Yeah.
And that's typically on commercial properties,
Someone
things
would
like
have
that.
to make a complaint and then they would have to go to the legal.
But I think what you're saying is we need to try to inform the residents that we're doing this. So that's actually a very difficult thing to do. We sent out 300 letters to 300 properties. There isn't 300 people in this audience. So we try to communicate as best we can to the residents, and it's very difficult. But I think we'll do our best. Like we said, we can put something on our website, we can, you know, make it very public as much as we can. But I think our lawyer would advise us not to get involved in anybody's personal sale transaction. But we can always make it very clear that this developer is coming in front of us once they feel that they have this right to come in front of us. You know, we are going to actively try to get people interested in our town, but I don't know how far that'll go.
And if there's ever any question, if someone ever reaches out and says, I am the named redeveloper of this area, which includes your property, you can say right then and then, that's impossible because I have not given consent for you to have any control of my
And I
property.
know that.
Right. So, I mean, any questions that come up, please, this is going to be a dynamic process. Always put your questions through the clerk, because that will keep the record of it. Everything goes through the clerk, and the clerk will absolutely email me the split second she gets your question, and I will have to, and I will be able to respond. But that's the process. Any questions?
Ben, Ben, you gotta speak in the mic, please.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I understand what she's trying to say about fraudulent people, and I understand that you cannot get involved in their personal dealings. But is there at some time ever where you know what the developers are doing, people who, for lack of a better word, have become incompetent because of their age. Is there any protection, anything, like, does this developer at some time, I know this is all hypothetical, so I'll try to be brief as I can, have to come before you folks and say, okay, I just bought 6 properties and they're all about 800 years old together. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit. Is there any point where the government would be involved or oversee any kind of a purchase or deal? No?
The only thing is they would have to show control of some sort or standing in a property before they could be named a redeveloper. That's all that is. So we can't determine what that mechanism is. There's a lot of different documents that can do that. I will tell you that if we ever hear anything, we're not going to say, oh, we didn't hear it. Of course, we're going to protect the residents as best we can.
That's
so
what I'm trying to
I mean, just as a casual observer.
She knows of something and approaches someone here and says, hey, there's a bad deal going on out here.
Yeah, but we would do that just as a good neighbor.
Not getting involved.
Yeah, but not as an official thing, just as good neighbors. That's the only thing that we can stipulate.
That's better than nothing. Okay.
Thanks, Ben. Yes, sir.
Yes. All right, add to this. Mike Huntsman, I'm at 24 East Fifth Avenue on the house behind the apartments. There is people coming out. 6 months ago, people reached out to me, called me every week about purchasing my property. I finally called him back. I just said, hey, what's going on here? I'm not selling my house. Why you keep calling? And he said, well, we're very interested in your property. So there is people out there trying. A month ago, I get a postcard with my house and my car, and it says, we want to buy your property. Reach out to us. So the point to your question, there is people reaching out to us. So I just want to make sure everybody aware of that it is happening.
Right.
I'm careful.
I'm not speculating. No.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Dave Henniker, 36 East Fifth. I guess my question would be, say you have a couple developers come in, are we going to be notified of what's going to be changing on the pike with new businesses and stuff? About 2 years ago, the liquor store moved down to the end of Fifth. I never even got a mail. But now on 6th Street, when somebody wanted to add a driveway, I get a mailer. I don't understand these types of things where it's one thing I get a mailer for, the other thing I get no notice whatsoever.
The only time you're going to be notified, Dave, is if someone is trying to change the use, number one, and they are required to come in front of us and do a use variance. If you are within 200 foot of that property, they legally have to notify you. You'll get a certified letter that says, we intend to expand upon our parking lot. So if you're within 200 feet of that said property, legally, if they need a variance to do what they want to do, whether it be a use variance, which means they want to change the use of the property, or whether it's a variance because of a setback, or a variance because of buffers or something like that. If there's any kind of a variance required by law, they have to notify anyone within 200 feet of the property. Other than that, if somebody wants to change, there's a building that has a footprint and it's a donut shop, and they want to go in, and a donut shop is a permitted use in that footprint. If they want to come in and put a coffee shop in the same footprint, they're not changing the footprint, not changing anything, it's a permitted
Well,
use.
liquor store is definitely changing the footprint from a convenience store to a pizza shop.
No, it's footprint, means actual building.
The building's
actual
footprint.
shape of the building.
In other words, they're not modifying the building, which is the footprint
Yeah, but
of.
usage wise.
That's use, yeah, that's what you said, use.
If it's permitted use in a zone, it can go from real estate to pizza to liquor to any other sort of permitted commercial in the zone.
And there's no knowledge.
As long as it's private use of their properties. And unless they're changing the site, like Chairwoman says, there's.
Changed my property now, you know.
Well, now here's the thing, Dan.
But you're at the end of my street.
But you know what,
I guarantee you that.
to that point, if there is, I'm going to say this, I believe, right now, tattoo establishments are not a permitted use in the borough of Runnemede. Correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't changed that yet. If someone wants to come in and change the pizzeria to a tattoo establishment, again, that's a use variance, it's not a permitted use. So you would be, if you're within 200 feet, you would be notified, and if that's something that you object to, you come in and you speak at the public portion of that meeting, and you say to the board, listen, I think that is deplorable, I think it's going to lower my property value, I think it's going to have drugs or kids or whatever your feelings are. That's what we're here for. We take all that stuff into consideration. This board is pretty much a complaint-driven board. Like, we want to promote businesses, but if the residents have problems with something, we take that to heart, and we really want our residents, to be happy and satisfied, because they are our homeowners and they're our taxpayers. So I want you to know that whenever there's something that comes up, we do take everything very seriously. That everyone, I love the room being full, because that's what I'm here for. So, but it's a use variance, they have to notify you. If not, if there's no use variance, or no setback differences or things, no variance at all, you don't have to be notified legally. All right, thank you. Anybody else?
Can I just say, the next letter that is sent out.
Rochelle, come up to the microphone, please, I'm sorry.
No problem. Can the next letter that's sent out, for the next meeting, after whatever decision is made here tonight, can that also, just when you go to vote, there is the legal language that must be on there, and then there's also the interpretive statement about that, the legal language. Can that be on the next letter, since even the words, that were on this one, even though they were underlined in certain things, there's just going to be language on there that people get a little bit confused about when they're reading it. So I would just say, yes, this room was full, but it might have been more full if people actually understood the entire language of that letter that was sent out.
And I'm going to answer that.
Go ahead.
Number one, the letter and the language in that is really driven by the statute and the case law. We cannot put an interpretive statement because we have to, it's a legal notice. That's why we had to follow it, and that's why everybody got individual letters.
I wanted to put in a statement.
They tried, I'm sorry, meaning the planning board and governing body tried to change the language, and because there is such specific rules and such specific case law meaning lawsuits that already happened, that already have ruled about bad notices and good notices, we have to follow what the rules are. I will say this, the letter that you received was a notice specific to this.
Yes.
In the newspaper was also another public notice. I'm going to ask everybody to keep an eye on, for this process, on the website, because that's where your next batch of notices are going to be. There may or may not be, but there's no requirement to have individual letters to individual property owners after this step. But I know the governing body is going to say, when you have public forums at the planning board level and also at the governing body level, when we're having our discussion nights. So keep an eye on the website, and the only other official notice will be in the paper when they have a final hearing for adoption of ordinance, but that's at the end of the process. Look through the website. They do a pretty good job telling what's coming up, next steps. So, once a month, just pop on there, and we'll put it in there in plenty in advance so people can adjust their schedules.
So there is no, the letter that you send out can't have the interpretive language on it, but there's nothing else that can go on any other forum like the website?
Not at this particular
Okay.
moment.
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
That's okay, just want to know.
unfortunately, our hands are tied.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Well, thank you very, very much for coming out. Thank you very much for all the questions. And that'll conclude my testimony. I just want to point out before everybody leaves, so it's on the record. So we responded to all the public questions. There are a few revisions based on my testimony, specifically regarding the referred resolution, which will have an adjustment to the paragraph. And also, we're going to be very clear that the study was undertaken non-condemnation by the planning board's designation. So that will require a revision to page 4 of our report, as I indicated in my testimony. But with that, the rest of the report will stand.
So Steve, we're not going to adopt this resolution tonight, you're revising this?
You can adopt that resolution and just say as amended by, no, that's the planning board resolution.
Yes, that's correct.
The referring resolution by the governing body did not say non-condemnation. But this resolution, absolutely, tonight's resolution says non-condemnation. Right, so I just want to make sure that, but, so this report, if you approve this evening, we'll just have a clarification of that paragraph as far as my attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, at that, I will entertain a motion to close the public portion of the meeting on this application. Motion Mr. Ockley, seconded by Mr. Miller, all in favor? Okay. Mr. Ryan,
The board has heard the testimony from the township engineer you reviewed. Previously, you had reviewed exhibit one.
Yeah, for roads.
entertain a motion to accept the resolution as read, please.
I'll second.
Motion to Mr. Ockley, seconded by Mr. Ranieri. Roll call, please. Yes.
We're just trying.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Yes.
Years. So.
Mr. Ockley?
Yes. Our own.
Mr. Laverde?
Art way.
Mr. Ranieri?
Yes.
Of making stuff.
Mayor Kapaz?
Yes.
And Ms. Dodds?
Yes.
That's it. All right, well, everything has been adopted, and again, I thank everybody for coming out. You're welcome to come out second Wednesday, every month from here, 7 o'clock, time doesn't change. Please come on out, we like having you. No, at this point in time, hang on. At this point in time, we have to open up the meeting to the public on good welfare. Anyone who wishes to speak under, on any, item at all, they come to be heard, not on this application, but on anything at all.
Seeing no one make the motion to close the public portion.
Motion by Mayor Klein, seconded by Mr. Ockley, all in favor? All right, motion to adjourn at 9:05.